everyone. This is another lesson that I'm doing recorded. So go to your notes, please. Open up your factorization notes, and we're moving on to dots today. Okay, dots is just an acronym for difference of two squares, but I'll tell you what that means. Okay, so open up your notes and turn to, still on the first page. Okay, so there's some stuff that you need to fill in on that worksheet that tells you how to spot dots. Okay, before I carry on, you need to remember that factorization is the opposite of distribution, right? So you're trying to figure out what was multiplied to give me the thing that they've just given me. Alright, so I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. Okay. We need to fill in our criteria. Okay, so what is the difference of two squares? The difference of two squares happens when there are two terms. Okay, so something minus something, so two terms. There must be a negative in between the two terms, so it must be a subtraction sign. All of the powers must be even, so if there's an x to the power of something, it must be x squared, or x to the power 4. Or y to the power of 6. It has to be an even number. It can't be an odd number. All the coefficients must be perfect squares. So the numbers in front of the variables, they have to be perfect squares. So 9 times 9 is 81. That's a perfect square. Okay, so here's an example of dots, which is the difference of two squares. I can already see that 81 is 9 times 9, so the coefficient is a perfect square. X to the power 4 is x squared times x squared, so that's also a perfect square. I can see that my exponent is an even number. 64 is also a perfect square, and y squared is also a perfect square. And there's a negative in between the two terms, and there's only two terms. Okay, so I can clearly see that I'm working with dots. Dots is different to highest common factor, but sometimes the two work together, and I'll show you when that happens. But dots is another thing, another way of factorizing something. Okay, but it has to abide by all of those rules, and you'll get used to it as we do more examples. Okay, so here's an example, and they want me to factorize this. So before I even think about dots, I'm going to say, is there a highest common factor? So is there a number that can go into 4 and 25? No, there's not. Okay, so I always start with highest common factor first. Okay, it's not highest common factor. Is it dots? Well, let's check. It's two terms. Both of the numbers are perfect squares. I'm working with a perfect square, m squared. My exponent is an even number, and it's got a subtraction sign, so I'm definitely working with dots. Okay, this is the way that you factorize it. The first thing you do is you open up two brackets. Okay, so I open up two brackets. The one bracket is going to have a plus sign, and the other one is going to have a minus sign. It doesn't matter which one you put in what. So I put mine the positive first and the negative second. You can put yours the other way around. It doesn't matter. Alright then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to square root my terms. Okay, so I'm going to square root 4m squared. And if I square root that, I'm going to get 2m. I put 2m in the first term of both the brackets. And then I'm going to do the same for the 25. So I'm going to square root the 25. Square root of 25 is 5, and I'm going to put it in the second term of both of the brackets. And that's the answer. Okay. So I know this seems weird because now you're stuck with brackets again in your answer, but you must remember that in factorization you'll often get brackets in your answer. So if you want to check if you've done your dots correctly, what you can do is on the side in pencil or whatever it is, you can check yourself by multiplying out the brackets. Okay, so those are the brackets that I got. How do I multiply out two brackets like that? I use FOIL. Okay, so I'm going to say 2m times 2m, 2m times negative 5, and that's what I'm going to get. And then I'm going to do the same with that second term, so 5 times 2m, 5 times negative 5, and I'm going to get 10m minus 25. Then I've got like terms here, so minus 10m plus 10m is just 0. So I'm left with 4m squared minus 25, and if you look back, that's exactly what they gave you. Okay, so you factorized it correctly. So usually what we would do is we would give you this and we would say simplify the expression, and then you would give me this in the end. So this would be your final answer. Now I've done the opposite. Now I've given you this part. So I've given you the answer and I've asked you to factorize it. So put it back into the brackets that it was before, and that's how you do it. Okay. Okay, copy down number 2. Alright, so I've got 36t squared minus 121x to the power of 8. Okay, let's check if it starts. 36 is a perfect square, 121 is a perfect square, 11 times 11. And I've got t squared, so there I've got a perfect square, x to the power of 8, an even exponent, so I'm definitely got a perfect square there. And I've got a subtraction sign, and only 2 terms, it's definitely dots. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to open up my brackets. The one is going to be a positive bracket, the other one is going to be a negative bracket. And now I need to start square rooting. So the square root of 36t squared is 6t. And then the square root of 121x to the power of 8. So square root of 121 is 11. X to the power of 8 square rooted. I just half the exponent, so I'm going to get 11x to the power of 4. And that's my final answer. Okay, so if you want to, sorry, my phone, airplane mode. Okay, so if you want to go and check yourself now, you would go and you would FOIL those 2 brackets and then see if you get back to the question. Okay. All right, number 3. Number 3 doesn't look like it's dots. Okay, does anybody know why it doesn't look like it's dots? I mean, I've got my exponents that are both even. I've got my subtraction sign. The problem is the 18 and the 8. Both of those aren't perfect squares, right? And remember earlier I said to you, first check if there's a highest common factor. Okay, so you always check for highest common factor first. So is there a number that goes into 18 and 8? Yes, there is, right? It's 2. So I'm going to first take out my highest common factor before I even do anything with dots. It doesn't even feature yet. First highest common factor always. Okay, so I'm going to divide through by my highest common factor. So there I'm going to have 9x squared, and there I'm going to have 4y squared. Okay, so there's my highest common factor. Remember to write it down. Okay, now check if it's dots. So 9 is a perfect square, 3 times 3. 4 is a perfect square, and then the x's and the y's are perfect squares, so I'm working with dots. So I'm going to bring my 2 down, and I'm going to open up 2 brackets to factorize this one. The one's negative and the one is positive. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did previously. So I'm going to square root the first term. So the square root of 9x squared is 3x. And then the square root of 4y squared is just 2y. And that's my final answer. Okay, so some of you might still be copying it down. So if you can just pause the video, please, Ms. Delafield. All right. Okay, so let's do one again. Okay, so this one I'm going to actually ask you to do by yourself. So if you can copy down number 4 and number 5, be careful with number 4. There is a trick to number 4, but I'm going to see who can get that one. And then number 5 is just a normal dots, so you don't need to do anything special there. Just open up your 2 brackets. The one is positive, the one is negative, and then square root. Okay, so pause the video, please, Ms. Delafield, and then we will start it just now. Alright, so you should have done number 4, x to the power of 4 minus 1. So open up your 2 brackets, the one is positive and the one is negative. Okay, then I'm going to square root. The square root of x to the power of 4 is x squared, and the square root of 1 is 1. Okay, so there's my 2 brackets. Right, the only trick with this one is that you've got dots again, right? So if you have a look at that second bracket, again, I've got 2 perfect squares and I've got a negative, so I can redo dots. So the first bracket I'm just going to bring down again. The second bracket I'm going to factorize again. Okay, so I'm going to open up my 2 brackets. The one is going to be positive, the one is going to be negative. Then I'm going to square root. Square root of x squared is x, and square root of 1 is 1. And now I'm finished. Okay, so if you didn't refactorize that second term, you would have lost 1 mark. So you would have got 1 mark for your first step, 1 mark for your second step. Okay, and then the number 5, number 5, everything's perfect square there. All my exponents are even. So I'm going to open up my two brackets. I'm going to square root the first thing. So the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of y to the power of 6 is y to the power of 3, because you half your exponents. Then I'm going to do the same thing for 36. So square root of 36 is 6. Square root of a to the power of 4 is a to the power of 2. And then the square root of b to the power of 8 is b to the power of 4. Okay, and I don't have any like terms, so that's it. Alright, let me just see here. Alright, you have homework. Okay, I can just see all of you guys just sighing and like so angry that you have homework, but anyways. Okay, so your homework is exercise 16.4. Please take it down on page 180. You have to do all the questions except for number 4a. Okay, so if you have a look in your textbook on page 180, all of the things that I'm giving you are dots. Please remember that before you do dots, you need to first take out a highest common factor if there is a highest common factor. Okay, so just first check, is there a number that goes into both of these terms? First divide through by that. Okay, good luck, guys.